I'll quickly tell you the intent of this webinar, this presentation. It's about understanding how bird watching in India has matured today and how it all started. So there's, I've just tried to join some dots and I can only deliver very little in 20 minutes. And just to give you an overview of how it all started, let me go further. Oh, sorry. So as you can see, I'm not going to talk too much because a lot is written here, but just to give you an idea that it's now about 140 years. And in 1860, A.O. Hume started to collect information, data, and he had, in 20 years, he had 160 people reporting to him about birds in India from different places. And all those are recorded. Then the next step that happened, which changed the course of ornithology in India, was because of Dr. Salim Ali. So this young lad used to live in Bombay, and he would go hunting sparrows, which they would make curry out of in the evening. and sparrows were all over the place. One day he saw the sparrow which had a yellow throat. So if you've read this book, Fall of a Sparrow, you'd know what I'm talking about. So Dr. Salim Ali, he was a young lad, and he took this sparrow to, he said, this looks different. It's got a yellow throat, and it's not the one that we get regularly for our meal. So he took this sparrow to Mr. Miller in BNHS, Bombay Natural History Society. And then he understood that there are different dimensions to birds. There's conservation, there are many other things. And so he got involved with that. Anyway, he was connected with nature. This is something that started to build along with Dylan Ripley. And they brought out 10 volumes. In his lifetime, he brought out 10 volumes of birds of India. And these are Bibles. This is what we looked at when we were growing up in terms of bird watching. And each field guide, each book talked to us, not just about the species or its behavior or its distribution, but also, let's say you get a great horned owl. What are you going to do it on a full moon night? If you sort of break the left leg and then put it into milk and then you consume it the next morning, you will get magical powers. The lot of these anecdotes. If you eat a thickney, a curlew, stone curlew, it'll taste like quinine, so it may just help you eradicate malaria. So there are these little piece of information that just made the entire journey very interesting. If you go through these old books of Dylan Ripley and Salim Ali, then what happened was that hunting was prevalent. There were lots and lots of people who were hunting with the help of Maharajas. They were hunting grounds, and as you can see in one of the sentences in 1938, Lord Linlithgow shot 4,273 birds in Bharatpur. When I was small, I must have been 10 years or something, maybe 40 years ago, and when I visited Bharatpur, there would be these huge flocks of birds that would just make this, skies absolutely dark. Of course, things have changed now. So these are old plaques that you'll still see. So hunting was prevalent, and then Maharajas used to use these places, they used to preserve these places as their hunting grounds. There's one outside Jaipur called Jalana, which is now such a great leopard park, but those were the hunting grounds of Maharaja of Jaipur. So where the British officers would go and shoot as well during the Raj. So about 20 years ago, things started to change. many tour operators would travel to these hotspots, taking tourists from England and America and different parts of the world, and they would conduct these tours for foreign nationals, and they'd be able to take back a lot of information home. But what happened was that people started to map. So these sort of books came up. Raj Singh and Chris brought out the first book, the guide book, and then many such guides happened. In 2010, after the recession, money started to flow in, and the Indians got a lot of money, so they could hang around great binoculars and around their necks, and they could carry large lenses and cameras. So it just changed the course of bird watching in India completely. Earlier, it was in the hands of few foreign companies, and they were being assisted by tour operators who were just giving them logistics. So this is how it sort of started to help bird watching tourism in India. And then, of course, it was conservation and it was ecotourism. It started to mature even further. People started to understand that if they go wrong, this is how they will go wrong, so how to correct it. And, and then, of course, social media happened. So a lot of things sort of changed. And you can see the bird fest started to, I've been coming here for 20 years now, to Rutland Water. And this is one of the earlier, this is Mike. That's you.
Don't realize that happened.
So this is that man in 2005 sitting in Canada. So Mike Prince is a friend of mine. He's going to talk to you a little bit about his experiences in India as well, because he spent 15 years there. And then some of the other slides. So this is how the awareness has increased from 1800s to 1900s, and now finally we are in 2020, where India is such a great hotspot, and we have over 32,000 or 37,000. Well, we'll come to that number right now. So it's like people in India are making use of websites like eBird and Zenocanto and various others. So they're feeding in more information, more data into the systems, which are global now, and which in turn help conservation of birds in India. Then birding lodges started to come up. We set up the first birding lodge in Pangot near Nainital to promote bird watching, but also to build capacity. Today we've got 15 different companies which are offshoots of our company, which have where guides have acquired entrepreneurial skills. They've gone ahead and created their own companies. Hundreds of regular tourists have been converted into ecotourists or bird watchers because of these lodges. I went and created a lodge in Gujarat to start off with the concept of bird watching. Earlier it was only cultural tourism. So things like that, and then backwoods camp has been there for a long time, and then Lama camp happened. So he's going to talk to you about Lama camp and at Eagle Nest. So you can see now we have 32,000 people on eBird in India, which means that they're reporting their sightings, they're adding data, and all this is great stuff for conservation of birds. Jungle Lore, the first birding lodge that I said was set up near Nainital. Then Satal birding camp. Now this place, we don't have a camp anymore here of ours, but there are many guides who now run hives. They talk about conservation, they take people out on trails. So they are all being trained and understood the importance of bird tourism in this area, the highly bird-centric tourism that happens here. So they've been shifting the mindsets, poachers, trappers, they got engaged with conservation now, and for example, the Great Himalayan National Park, where there were poachers and trappers, they were hunting Western Tragopan because they wanted to get the crest for their hats, and they sold at very good price, are now the guides for trekkers, taking them to show where the Western Tragopans are without killing them. so decrease in wildlife loss, greater awareness, and it's a beautiful state of cooperation between different bodies. Now here, I want Mike to come in. Mike, can you just introduce yourself and then quickly talk about this?
Hello everybody. The title of Mohit's talk said Western tourists influencing birding in India, and that's almost me, because aside from the tourist bit, I've lived in India for almost 20 years altogether. I'm Western, and actually for the last few years I've been working with an NGO in India promoting bird watching and promoting citizen science and good data recording. So the eBird figures that Mohit mentioned there have just boomed in the last few years. And what's brilliant to see in India is bird watching is booming, and it's mostly booming amongst the young. So most of the new bird watchers are students, they're people in their 20s and 30s, not quite as grey-haired as the rest of us here, but it's incredibly key in India because of a lot of conservation problems where we need this generation to be getting hold of these. So just a couple of little stories coming up from places Mohit's mentioned here, all of which are worth a talk on their own, so I'm going to go very brief introduction. But Amur falcons in Nagaland. Now I don't know how many people have heard much about Amur falcons in Nagaland. The number of hands is like 1, 2, which is pretty impressive, or pretty poor really, when you think. I would say Amur falcons in Nagaland actually for me is the most exciting, most impressive bird watching spectacle I've ever experienced in the world in my life, and no one's really heard of it. What happened was about 10, 12 years ago, a foreign tourist in Nagaland, non-bird watcher, reported large-scale hunting that they'd come across on their travels. And some Indian guys, through a conservation NGO, decided to go out and investigate. And what was known about Amur falcons in India is that they migrate from China, where they're breeding, to southern Africa. So they're an amazing migration across about 4,000 kilometers across open water. But they're seen in India in migration in sometimes flocks of a few hundreds, but not too much. They mostly migrate at night. But anyway, what happened when they went to Nagaland is around a newly constructed reservoir, these researchers found huge numbers of Amur falcons massing on migration, almost uncountable, tens of thousands in the air altogether. But what they did discover was hunting on a shocking scale. I think over the time they spent a few weeks there, they reckoned of something like, in the autumn period, the migration period is only about 6 weeks, something about 120,000 Amur falcons being killed. And killed and sold locally in the local villages for food. So this is 120,000 falcons. I mean, you can imagine what size of bird population there was coming through there. And it's thought that probably very difficult to count, but 1 million birds or so are congregating at there just for a few weeks in end of October, early November. They're feeding on termites and then they continue their migration. I went once and at dusk you have, well, it was something like 50,000 to 100,000 Amur falcons just searching around, calling all the time. Incredible place. But very briefly, various actions were put in place when they discovered the scale of this hunting. And to cut to a very long story, which I'll tell you some other time, the following year there was no hunting whatsoever happening in this area in Nagaland. And they started to try and conserve and attract people to come and watch this amazing spectacle. It's a difficult place to access, it's a really short period of the year, so it's not very easy for them to make anything in terms of sustainable ecotourism, but thankfully the hunting was stopped there. And this spectacular migration still happens, so hopefully we can go and visit it at some stage. That's Amur falcons in Nagaland. One other story I mentioned there, Eagle Nest. Eagle Nest, a few more people have probably heard of Eagle Nest. Eagle Nest is a wildlife sanctuary in the eastern Himalayas, very close to the Bhutan border. And the eastern Himalayas has fantastic diversity of wildlife generally, bird life especially. But how that became particularly famous was in, was it 1995, I think. There was a birder from India, who was actually an astronomer, a part-time birder, who saw a bird he just didn't recognise. And this bird, he didn't see again for 10 years. He then resaw it in 10 years, and eventually got described as a new species to science, the Bougainvillea shikla. Population is probably maybe 20 birds, that's all, in a 2 square kilometre area. And now that area is the best area for birding in the eastern Himalayas. The whole area is protected and guided by locals who used to be poachers, most of them. And if you get a chance to go, that's definitely one place to visit. There's some of the conservation stories around Amber falcons. And a couple of quick ones. Moving over to Western India, Great Indian Bustard. A few of you might have been lucky enough to see Great Indian Bustard. This is one of India's prime conservation issues at the moment. There's about 100 or so Great Indian Bustards left in the wild. That's it. Only really in the Thar Desert in Rajasthan, and they're suffering from mostly habitat encroaching, which is an enormous problem. They need a lot of area. Also collisions with power lines, but there's a massive conservation project through locals trying to protect these birds there. And not far away from that, some of you may have heard, and some of you may have seen a talk yesterday from Chris Bowden of the RSPB about the vulture decline in India. This is one that sort of system science has helped detect, but vulture declines. So for those who've travelled in the 1980s, 1990s might have seen big flocks of vultures in India. The main two species have declined by 99.9 or 99.8%. There are almost no vultures. You don't see them in India anymore. But there's one place in Bikaner, again in the Thar Desert, where we do get good numbers, and again a local conservation reserve now set up, so you can still see hundreds, thousands if you're lucky, of vultures. Okay, back over.
Yeah, so there are many other benefits that have happened. People, because of the Western tourists, have started to hone their skills. The language has become better, the communication, and for example, but you might be able to, when you go out with a birder, a local birder, he may say, oh, it's fully naked stork, which means that it could be woolly necked stork, or it could, or you might hear wet biscuit bulbul. It could be red whiskered bulbul, or it could be word-eater flycatcher, and you'll hear bird-eater flycatcher, you know. So things like that. But it's good fun. It's just that, you know, local people are getting their employment, they're getting their livelihood out of this, and they're learning, and they're understanding. You know, it's just about oneness. It's about inclusivity. So that's another chapter. We don't have much time to talk about it, but now so the local people understand that, oh, this bird is found only in this area and we need to conserve it, you know. Earlier they did not know about it. So they were probably hunting such birds, or any bird. So there are many challenges that we've been talking about and we've been tackling at Asian Adventures. Guide training we've been doing, we've been talking about zero waste. Anybody who's interested in knowing more about our goals, about our conservation goals at Asian Adventures, please drop in at S27. We are in Marquee, Swallow Marquee, and I'd be happy to tell you what we're doing with Asian elephants, what we're doing with garbage waste in the Himalayas, what are we doing with pangolin conservation, and those are the goals of the company. This company is a conservation travel company, and I'm the founder. Mohit Aggarwal is my name. Many things which need to be done, and many things that we're already doing. With that, I will end this presentation. Thank you very much for being here.
Okay, folks, if you're not staying for the next